Life is a game, and most of us have been playing it without knowing the rules. Once you understand them, you start winning in ways that feel almost effortless. Welcome to The Conscious Creator. Today we're exploring Florence Scovel Shinn and her remarkable book, The Game of Life and How to Play It. And let me tell you, this isn't a quiet summary of a dusty old text. This is a lively journey into the wit, sass, and vision of a woman who managed to make metaphysics sound like a game you could actually win. Florence was born in 1871 in New Jersey. She studied art, became an illustrator, and made her living in New York at a time when very few women were working in those fields. She married an artist, Everett Shinn, lived in Greenwich Village, and after their divorce in 1912, she built her own independent life. And then, in her 50s, she took the boldest step of all. She published her own book. Not because the world was waiting with open arms, in fact, publishers turned her away, but she refused to be stopped. She printed it herself in 1925, and the book spread like wildfire by word of mouth. It's worth pausing here, because in the 1920s, women couldn't even vote in many parts of the world, let alone build careers as artists and authors. For Florence to not only work, but to stand on her own, print her own book, and become a spiritual teacher, that was radical. And she carried herself with a confidence that made it all look effortless. She didn't seem weighed down by the obstacles she must have faced. She walked right through them, leaving us with the impression that playing the game of life wasn't about struggling harder, but about learning to play smarter. Florence's genius was in how she framed life. She didn't call it a test or a punishment. She didn't make it sound solemn or heavy. She called it a game. That single word changes everything. A game implies play, strategy, moves, and rules. It means if you've been losing, it's not because life hates you, it's because you've been playing with the wrong strategy. She told people to stop blaming fate and start learning the rules. And the first rule, whatever you put out comes back. Thoughts, words, emotions, they're all game moves. Send out fear, and fear bounces back like a boomerang. Send out love or faith, and those multiply. Florence wasn't sentimental about it. She was direct. Stop expecting life to cheat you. It doesn't cheat, it reflects. Florence was sharp when it came to words. To her, words weren't casual, they were creative. Every phrase you speak is like moving a piece on the board of life. She used to tease her students about the things they muttered under their breath. If you said, "I never get ahead," she'd say, "Well, don't be surprised when you don't." If you sighed, "I always attract the wrong people," she'd remind you that you just placed an order with the universe, and it always delivers. Her humor is what made these lessons stick. She'd call words weapons. Not because she wanted you to fight with them, but because they were sharp and effective. Used well, they cut through limitation. Used carelessly, they cut you off from your good. And she didn't just talk about affirmations like so many do today. She gave her students actual tools. One woman she worked with affirmed daily that she already had her perfect home. She spoke it with conviction. And seemingly out of nowhere, the exact apartment she envisioned became available, down to the smallest details. Florence adored these kinds of stories because they prove the point. The game doesn't require years of grinding effort. It requires speaking and believing in alignment with truth. Here's where Florence really stands out. She didn't just teach affirmations. She paired them with denials. She saw the mind like a garden. If it's full of weeds, planting roses won't do much. You have to clear the weeds first. Denials were her way of pulling weeds. A denial wasn't about pretending a problem didn't exist. It was about stripping fear or lack of its power. This fear has no hold. This appearance of failure means nothing. Only then, after clearing, did she recommend planting affirmations. I am divinely supplied. Everything I need comes at the right time. Clear, then plant. Deny the lie, affirm the truth. It was her signature rhythm, her way of making affirmations land deeply. Florence insisted that faith wasn't passive. It wasn't sitting back, wishing, and waiting. It was about trusting the next move, even when it didn't make sense. She called it following intuitive leads. She told stories of people who suddenly felt like calling an old friend, or walking into a certain store, or showing up somewhere unexpected and finding exactly the opportunity they'd been waiting for. Today, We might call this synchronicity. Florence called it the way the game works when you stop forcing and start trusting. Her reminder was always the same. The how isn't your job. The end result is your focus. The path is life's to design. One of Florence's boldest points was that fear is just as creative as faith. She would laugh at how seriously people defended their worries, not realizing they were actively rehearsing their worst-case scenarios into being. She'd say fear was like ordering from the cosmic menu. Sit there insisting, "I really hope I don't get the bad meal." And sure enough, the waiter writes it down. Her advice was never to wrestle with fear, because fighting it just feeds it. She recommended substitution. Swap fear for faith, worry for gratitude, doubt for expectancy. To her, every fearful phrase was just a misplayed card. You could always choose another. Florence's most original teaching was about perfect self-expression. She believed each of us carries a divine design, a role in the game that only we can play. She told her students that frustration often comes from trying to copy someone else's role. Envy, imitation, comparison, all of these were wasted moves. The real winning strategy was to discover and step into your own design. She had a favorite affirmation: "There is a place that I am to fill and no one else can fill it. Something I am to do and no one else can do it." Imagine living from that belief. Suddenly, you're not competing. You're not scrambling. You're simply playing your part, and life arranges itself around that alignment. In her time, this message was radical. For women especially, roles were narrowly defined. Yet Florence told people to forget the roles imposed on them and discover their own. Florence loved to remind her students that life is not supposed to feel heavy and stiff. It's a game, which means you're meant to play it, and the most powerful tool for playing is imagination. She often teased people for using their imagination backward. Instead of picturing the success they wanted, they'd spend hours imagining disaster. She'd laugh and say, "You're brilliant at manifestation, you just happen to be manifesting your fears." Think about it. Someone goes into a job interview, and the night before they play the movie of themselves, stumbling over their words, sweating and looking foolish. And then, surprise, that's exactly what happens. Florence would smirk and point out, "Of course it did, you rehearsed it like an actor." But she insisted imagination could just as easily work for you. She'd tell her students to picture themselves walking out of that interview with confidence, to imagine shaking hands with ease, to feel the sense of being chosen. She understood that imagination was the rehearsal room of life. What you rehearse in your mind is what you'll perform on the stage of reality. And she wasn't afraid to add a little sass. If someone told her they couldn't imagine things working out, she'd shoot back, "Well, don't worry, life will take you at your word." She wanted people to stop using their imagination to dig holes and start using it to open doors. The beauty of this lesson in her teaching is that it brings back the joy. Manifestation doesn't have to be tense, grim work. It can be playful. It can feel like sketching, daydreaming, or painting a picture in your mind until it comes alive. Florence believed that when imagination is fun, it's powerful. That's when the game really starts to shift in your favor. Another area where Florence was radical was prosperity. In the 1920s, talking openly about money as a spiritual subject was unusual, but she declared that lack is an illusion, that abundance is natural, and that wealth is not greed when it flows in alignment with divine law. She made it clear. Prosperity doesn't come from clutching, hoarding, or worrying. It comes from trust, generosity, and alignment. She had no patience for guilt around wanting more. To her, prosperity was proof that you were playing the game well, not for selfishness, but for the flow of life itself. Florence also reframed obstacles in a clever way. Instead of seeing them as punishments, she said they were signs. A closed door simply meant that wasn't your door. A delay meant you weren't aligned yet. She told people to stop dramatizing setbacks. To her, a setback was just life saying, "Not this move, try another." If you stay open, she said, the right path always reveals itself. Here's where Florence's humor came out most. She mocked complaining. She'd say that every time you whined, you just played a losing card in the game. If you complain about bills, about people, about the weather, congratulations, you've just called for more of it. And the way she put it was almost funny in its bluntness. She said your words are like orders you send out to the universe. and life delivers them right back to you, no questions asked. To Florence, complaining was simply placing the wrong order. She'd remind her students, you can't talk defeat and expect victory. If you go around declaring how unlucky you are, life will prove you right. If you talk about being broke, more bills will find you. If you keep saying people let you down, you'll attract more who do. The universe doesn't take jokes or excuses, it just takes instruction. She wanted her students to laugh at themselves when they caught the habit, to see complaining not as harmless venting, but as squandering their turn in the game. And then, of course, to flip it, to declare instead what they actually wanted. She was cheeky, but she was right, the game rewards focus, not grumbling. Florence was adamant about not fixating on how things must show up. She said that when people get attached to one specific door, they close off all the better ones. And this is a lesson I learned the hard way in my early days of manifesting. There was a house I loved. I didn't focus on owning it, I focused on renovating it. I used to picture my husband and I working on it together. Sanding, painting, insulating, making it beautiful. That was my vision. And wouldn't you know, it happened. Only, not in the way I thought. Another woman bought the house, and she hired my husband to renovate it. And there I was, standing in the attic, insulating the walls, laughing to myself at how perfectly I had manifested exactly what I focused on. It was a lesson I'll never forget. The universe is literal. If you focus on working on a house, you'll find yourself working on a house. If you focus on owning one, you'll own it. That experience made me realize something else too. We can all look back at our own lives and trace how we created certain situations, both the good and the bad. If we're willing to be honest and take responsibility, we'll see that we've been manifesting all along. The game doesn't stop working just because we're not paying attention. The key is to get clear about the essence of what we want, not just the surface details. The house wasn't about plaster and insulation. It was about security, beauty, a home. And when we focus on the essence, we give life the freedom to pick the best door to deliver it through. One of Florence's strongest reminders was this: don't quit the game just because you're in the middle of a losing streak. She said too many people give up right before their breakthrough, throwing down their cards when life is about to turn in their favor. She loved to tell stories of people who affirmed and declared for weeks, sometimes months, with no visible change. Friends would roll their eyes, family would call it nonsense, and still the person kept going. And then, suddenly, everything shifted, the job appeared, the debt dissolved, the relationship healed. Florence would grin and say, they were winning the whole time, they just couldn't see the scoreboard yet. Her sass came out, especially when students whined about things not working. She'd quip, it's not that it isn't working, it's that you stopped working it. To her, persistence wasn't about working harder, but about refusing to let appearances shake your conviction. She often compared life to a stage play, reminding people that there's always a scene change coming. Just because the curtain looks dark doesn't mean the play is over, it means the set is being rearranged for the next act. Florence's message here is deeply practical. The game doesn't reward the quitter. It rewards the one who stays in motion, keeps affirming, keeps trusting, and keeps showing up with faith even when nothing looks different. That's when the tide turns. So if you've been affirming for your desire, and it seems far away, take Florence's advice. Don't pack up your pieces yet. Stay in the game. Because the moment you hold your ground with courage, you've already won. The results are just catching up. Florence was fierce about forgiveness. She said nothing blocked blessings more than holding resentment. She compared it to refusing to move your game piece because you're staring angrily at someone else's square. Her advice was short and sweet. Bless them, release them, move on. Not for their sake, but for your own. The moment you forgive, the board resets and the game opens again. So how do we take all this into our own lives? It starts by noticing the words we speak. Florence would tease us if she heard the casual complaints we mutter without thinking. She'd nudge us to stop calling for what we don't want and start affirming what we do. It's also about practicing that rhythm she loved so much. Deny the weeds, then plant the seeds. Every time fear appears, clear it of its power, then affirm the truth you want to live. It means trusting your intuition, those small nudges that seem random but lead to the right places. Florence believed those nudges were the hidden playbook of life. and following them is how you move with grace instead of struggle. And perhaps most importantly, it's about discovering and stepping into your perfect self-expression. Florence believed life flows when we're playing our own role, not copying someone else's. That belief is as freeing today as it was in her time. When we stop complaining, forgive quickly, trust the doors that open, and speak words that align with truth, we're playing her game, and it's a game we can actually win. Thank you for joining us on The Conscious Creator. If today's exploration inspired you, I encourage you to read Florence Scovel Shinn's The Game of Life and How to Play It for Yourself. You'll find a link in the description. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone else who would find these ideas meaningful.